I think in a lot of cases, that's what happens. People go see an investment advisor without having done their homework. And by homework, I mean getting a little bit of information, and there's really not that much in investing that you need to know in order to make a difference.
Hey there, my name is Eric, and this is Delve, the official thought leadership podcast of the Desautels Faculty of Management at McGill University. So today we're talking about money and personal finance. Now I know this can be an uncomfortable topic for a lot of people, but I can't think of a better person to talk to about this than Professor Benjamin Croitoru, an associate professor of finance here at McGill University, and he's also the academic director of McGill Personal Finance Essentials, which is a free personal finance course offered right here at McGill. Now, in this interview, we talk about tracking your spending, managing your credit card debt, and how to avoid the 3 most common investment mistakes. And this information is not just good general knowledge, but it can also protect you from unnecessary financial expenses. So let's delve into it. Hey, before we get into this interview, I just wanted to share, McGill Delve has launched a newsletter. So every week of the academic year, we send out our latest podcast episodes and thought leadership articles covering some of the biggest topics in management and organizational leadership. So you can sign up at delve.mcgill.ca. Thanks. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Professor Croitoru.
It's my pleasure. Very happy to be here.
Well, I'm very excited for this conversation on a personal level, just because it's a chance to for me to pick up some tricks and to share them with our audience a little bit. And also, I think personal finance is such a personal topic. It's sometimes difficult to talk about. So I think this is a great opportunity to have a nice open conversation about it. To kick things off. We are talking about personal finance. We're talking about financial literacy. So just to kind of give us a basic understanding of the terms here, what does it mean to be financially literate?
That's a tough question because there's always more than you can learn. And it's really hard to, know what's the threshold. There's not really a clear threshold, such that once you've passed a certain level of knowledge, you're literate. But I do feel that, once you learn a few basics, and they're probably less challenging than what people might think. Once you've learned a few basics, you know enough to make a real difference. And you regain a sense of power, a sense of control. And of course, you cannot always control everything. But I think with a relatively little knowledge, you can gain a sense of control and certainly feel less stressed about your finances. I really feel financial literacy, it's not just about, having more or less, or hopefully more money in your account, in your portfolio. It's about feeling safer. And it's really connected, in my opinion, to psychological and even physical wellness. Mm-hmm. I think finance looks complicated. There are lots of innovations, a zillion different products. And of course, if you want a career in finance, in investment management, there's a lot to know. But I also feel part of what's going on is the financial industry tends to overcomplicate things. And sometimes I feel might be a little bit partly because, it helps charge them more. A little bit of confusion can be good for profits. And I know I often criticize the financial industry, and it does not mean that they're bad people. I often criticize them, but it does not mean that they always give bad advice. They can really give good advice. They can teach you valuable things. But people should not forget that the banker, the investment advisor is not their friend. They have a job to do. They don't work for you. They work for the bank or whatever financial institution you're dealing with. And basically, they make most of their money by taking it from the customers. Mm-hmm. And that's fair, of course, because they provide a valuable service. But they're for-profit institutions. So often they don't resist the temptation of charging maybe a little bit more than the minimum. And I believe that overcomplicating things sometimes is a tool that can be used to help them with this.
Yeah, and it's tricky because you do want to trust to a degree, because, this is an individual who studied finance and presumably knows what they're doing and what they're talking about. But at the same time, you also want to feel like it's like going to a car mechanic and like you need to know some things.
What I tell people is that you cannot get all of your information from somebody who's trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of cases, that's what happens. People go see an investment advisor without having done their homework. And by homework, I mean getting a little bit of information, and there's really not that much in investing that you need to know in order to make a difference.
Well, yeah, okay. So let's demystify things a little bit. So on the topic of just personal spending and managing like your own finances on a day-to-day level, what are some signs that I might have some bad financial habits?
Well, how do you feel about your financial situation? Do you feel comfortable or do you feel stressed? And I think that, unfortunately, the answer for probably the majority of people is that they feel stressed about money. So yeah, if you don't feel happy about your situation, it's a sign that at least you should learn a little more to try to assess your situation objectively. So you mentioned spending, right? So that's a tough one. I love spending money. I think I spend too much myself. I really don't want to come across as, lecturing people or telling them what they should be spending on. One approach, the way I feel about this, I encourage people to, a lot of people tell people you need to have a budget. But I think it's a little overwhelming. I think it's very hard to draw a budget. And, once you have it, it's very hard to stick to it. So I would start with maybe recording your expenses and try to think objectively for every expense. What can I do about it? Do I really need this? Does it really make me happy? Is there anything I can do about it? And I would say don't worry about starting small. Okay, because it might be, I think a lot of people go to Starbucks or any other, nothing in particular against Starbucks, but a lot of people go buy an expensive coffee once or twice a day. And they might think, well, it's not a big deal. And of course, it's probably a lot less than what they spend, for example, on rent every month. But I would say don't try to start with the big things because it's too ambitious. It can be overwhelming. Try to start with relatively small things that are under your control.
Yeah.
And then try to learn a little bit of financial math. And there are certainly tools that you can use. You don't really have to do the math yourself. And you might realize that, the few dollars that you spend, say, on cappuccino a couple of times every day, if you could save them or just reduce the number of expensive coffees you get without, of course, completely eliminating them, the relatively small amount that you can save by looking into this, in the long term, they compound, they capitalize into an amount that's probably more than what you would expect.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would say try to start with a few small expenses. Ask yourself, objectively, does it really make me happy or not? And do a little bit of math. And again, you don't really have to do the math yourself. See how much difference it can make in the long term.
Yeah.
And I think that can really encourage you that with relatively small decisions, and I'm not talking about moving or changing job, with relatively small decisions, you can make a real difference in the long term.
Yeah, totally. And and on the topic of debt, like it's I don't know, like a lot of people take out big loans. Like debt is necessary for a lot of different kinds of purchases, like buying a house, buying a car. A lot of these things can be prohibitively expensive if you don't get a mortgage or a line of credit. But is taking debt ever a good idea in other situations? Like, should I be using a credit card?
Yeah, you definitely want to avoid high interest debt. So yeah, credit cards are so convenient, but you don't want them. You want to use them for convenience, maybe to earn some points. Don't use them as a way to borrow. So basically anything, almost, there are even worse things, like payday loans but almost everything is better than the credit card. So try a line of credit.
So I guess the advice there is pay off your credit card every month if you can. Don't spend more than you have.
Of course. And yeah, definitely if you can't do that, well, make it a priority to at least pay off your high interest debt, in particular before you start investing. I think you have a lot of people who, on the one hand, have some investments, on the other hand, have some high interest, say, credit card debt, where the interest is maybe 20% per year. Well, these people, you should pay off your high interest debt basically before you think about investing.
So, okay. So in terms of steps, so we rein in our spending, track what we're spending our money on.
Again, I don't want to say reining.
Oh, sorry.
Start tracking a few things.
Track a few things.
That would be my advice.
See where you can save a few dollars. Start addressing your high interest debt. What are some of the basic principles of investing that people should be aware of if they're just starting out?
So investing, so yes, it can be very complicated. There are so many options. Probably if you want to get the absolute best possible result, it's complicated. However, the way I like to think about it is that what makes, in my opinion, 90%, perhaps more of the difference, is really quite simple. Basically, what I think you need to do, you need to avoid the big classic mistakes that people tend to repeat over and over. And I'm including myself. I have made the mistakes. Number one, overpaying in fees. Okay, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but the data is very clear that you don't get better returns, better service because you spend more in fees. Okay, so in my opinion, it does not make sense to invest, or at least invest too much in mutual funds that charge you relatively high fees, like 2% per year. There are some funds that are available now where the fees are basically close to zero, that do very, very well. Number two, and here that's possibly the biggest mistake that people tend to make, don't assume that you know that you can forecast when the market's going to go up or down. Don't try to buy because you think that the market's going to go up. Don't try to sell. Don't sell because you think that the market's going to go down. And in particular, don't buy and sell based on the dominant mood, the sentiment of the market. I mean, if you buy and sell based on the dominant sentiment, the mood of the market, you're going to buy when everybody feels good about the stock market, but that's after it's been going up. You're going to sell when everybody feels down about the stock market, but that tends to be after it's been going down. So of course, if you buy high when after the market's been going up, if you sell low after the market's been going down, it's going to be a disaster. If you look at the way the typical individual investor tends to behave, that's actually what they tend to do. Because they buy and sell, they buy, for example, when the stock market feels safe after it's been going up for a few years. And of course, that's terrible.
Yeah, and I feel like it's important to remember that when you're making these investments, like they're supposed to be long-term, right? So I guess if you take that kind of view, hopefully, I mean, at least for me, it makes things a little bit easier to resist because it's like, well, okay, it'll bounce back, in 10 years or whatever.
Yes, but yeah. I think it's easy when you talk about it in theory.
Yeah.
But unless you've lived through it, you don't know exactly how you're going to react.
That's true.
If you're going to have the patience, the consistency, the willpower.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Okay, so what's number 3?
Mistake number 3 would be not being diversified enough. You want to try to buy a little bit of everything that's available in the market. Why? Well, basically because if you have a portfolio with many stocks, what's going to happen is that, almost every day some will go down, but also some will go up, and there will be a lot of cancellation of risk, of bad performance. And you will end up with a portfolio that's a lot less risky. Ideally, you want to have a little bit of every stock that's available in the market. So people might think, well, how's that possible? I don't have millions and millions of dollars. How can I buy a little bit of everything? Well, actually, you do have some funds, mutual funds or exchange-traded funds, that do the work for you, that just buy a little bit of everything without trying to select stocks. They're widely available, And the cherry of the icing of the cake is that because this type of fund is actually very little work for the financial institution, because they are not trying to choose the best times to buy or sell, or the best stocks to buy or sell, fees are very low. So if there's one thing that finance academics agree on, is that the core of your investments, the core of your stock portfolio should be a low-cost index fund where you're effectively holding a little bit of every stock that's in the market.
So if I walk into the bank and I'm talking to a financial advisor and I'm inquiring about products, like, what do I ask for? So I can ask for an index fund that covers the big companies. What other kind of financial products should I be looking at?
I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure the average person needs more than that. So I would say as a starting point, having some of your money in a low-cost, very broad index fund that covers basically all the stocks that are available in the world, and that's available, very easy to find at a low fee, and combine this with some very low-risk, short-term money market securities or treasury bills, money market funds. That's a great starting point, and actually that might be enough for most people. The way I would put it is that it's simple to avoid those big mistakes and do well. It's simple, but that does not mean it's easy. Okay, this is really not the same thing. It takes a lot of consistency and willpower. It's not easy, when there's a market crash and it looks like the whole financial world is collapsing. It's not easy to keep your cool and not sell while everybody around you is predicting that things are going to get even worse. It's not easy to stay well diversified, when everybody around you is getting excited around what's going to be the next bubble, right? It was .com stocks around year 2000, cryptos a few years back. And there's been so many examples throughout history. It's tough to stick to a well-diversified, balanced strategy in this kind of environment. And also, the financial industry, and again, I'm not saying they're bad people, and by the way, they can often give you good advice and provide you with valuable services, but they also spend quite a bit on marketing in order to, entice you to spend more than the minimum, because that's just have to be realistic. That's how they make more money. So it's hard to minimize the fees. Basically, to avoid the big mistakes, you have to fight first your own instinct and sometimes also the financial industry.
Yeah. Wow. Well, okay. So we covered a lot. Big themes that I'm kind of picking up is, keep things simple, hold your nerve where possible, don't overcomplicate things. And don't be afraid, small steps go a long way, and the challenge is just getting started. So starting small is a good idea. For people who want to learn more, I know that you're the academic director of McGill Personal Finance. So maybe that's a good place to end with a quick plug. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about that program and where people can sign up.
Yes, I would love to tell you a little more about the McGill Personal Finance Essentials program. So it's something I'm very proud of. It's an online course that's available to anyone. It's completely free. It's been designed to require no pre-existing knowledge. So it's, I think, accessible to anyone who has a few hours of free time available and who's motivated. And the course consists of 8 modules that cover different aspects of one's financial life. I think we've been able to help a lot of people.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and for anyone interested in signing up, I'll be sure to put a link in the description, in the show notes for this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Croitoru.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Croitoru, for your amazing insights. I got so much out of this conversation. In particular, I loved the focus on starting small. I think it went a long way to making finances feel a little less daunting for me. So to our listeners, what was your big takeaway from this episode? Is there something you found useful or wish that you learned more about? You can send us an email and let us know. You can reach us at delve.mcgill.ca. So Delve is the official thought leadership platform of the Desautels Faculty of Management at McGill University. My name is Eric Dicaire, and I was your host today. And I'm also an assistant editor at Delve, and I produced and mixed this episode. And Saku Mantere is Delve's editor-in-chief, and he produced all the original music. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.